We are joined today with Mike Buchanan, the head of the party in the UK called Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Care About Them, or I'm
And the
sorry,
women who
who love them.
yeah.
And it's a great pleasure to have you talking with me today. I'm a big fan of yours. I love what you're doing over there, and we're glad to talk with you today. We're going to talk about what's going on over there with your election.
Yep.
Going to talk about what's happening in the UK in general, and also to kind of have an exchange of information about what it's like over in the UK for our American listeners and people really all over the world. Every country, I think, is different in regards
Yes.
to men's rights and the position that men are in. So, of course, I want to get as much value out of this conversation in that regard. So, thanks for joining me today, Mike. Really
It's a
appreciate
pleasure and an honor. I mean, you know what I hold AVFM in the highest regard. I mean, I constantly refer to it as the beating heart of the men's rights movement. So it's a great pleasure.
It's such an honor to have you say that, and I wanted to talk about that actually because you. Probably more so than any other public figure, and you're a public figure, you're running for Parliament, for crying out loud. You've been very loyal to AVFM, and you've
Yeah.
made no bones about supporting AVFM.
No.
It's so many people. I have a hard time getting people from Gamergate to get an interview with me. It's like they say, "Oh no, I don't want to talk to AVFM. That's a kiss of death." But you've always been really, really loyal to AVFM, and have always supported us openly.
Yeah.
And that, while of course, you know,
Robert, at one time feminists would attack me for that association. It just made me, I mean, if they're attacking that association, that told me the association had to continue. And the loyalty goes both ways, to be fair. I mean, AVFM have been just wonderful right from the beginning. In fact, you published an article about 2 or 3 months before before we formed the party, called "Let's Get Practical," and then the one after the election, after we were registered, was "Let's Get Political." But no, AVFM have been extremely supportive, and that's despite us being a sort of a right of centre. A lot of our policies are socially conservative, and I know AVFM is apolitical, and it must remain apolitical. So no, it's been great.
great. Well, I mean, it's just I really, speaking on behalf of AVFM, I appreciate that so much, and everyone does. It's great to have someone who, like yourself, who is unabashed in their support of AVFM. But
No, indeed.
I just think it makes you different. It makes you really unique too.
Yeah. But it's something. I mean, I don't think a day goes by, Robert, when I don't tell one or two people. I get people coming to me to say, "How do I learn about feminism and men's rights?" And I say, "Subscribe to AVFM. It costs nothing.
Mm-hmm.
If you read every article and some of the comments for a month, you will then know more than 99.9% of the population about men's rights and gender politics."
Right.
It
Especially
is
what
just
they're told about men's rights and men's rights activists. Right.
I mean, I've learned just so much. I mean, I look back and think, how did I write 3 books about feminism before I heard of AVFM? It kind of embarrasses me now, to be honest with you, because the amount I understand now compared to 2.5 years ago, maybe from AVFM, it's just a constant education. It is just this joining up of the dots is it's just an extraordinary phenomenon, and may it go on for the next 50 years.
Good. Let's talk about you now. You are running for Parliament, and there's a general election in 6 weeks?
It's a bit more than 5 now.
Okay.
5
okay. So, okay. A little bit more than 5 weeks. You're running for Parliament.
Yeah.
You've now what? I just kind of like we'll do just like a generic informational interview.
Yeah.
When did you decide that you wanted to run for Parliament, and what do you hope to accomplish if you get elected? Which I'm guessing may not be likely, but just by running, you're hoping to accomplish something.
I mean, there's a remote possibility that I won't be working at Westminster on after May the 8th.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I mean, we're very much at the stage of the game of raising public awareness, I think, about men's issues. Most men, I don't know the proportion, it'd be interesting to see some research, but most men are not conscious that as a class, men's rights, men's human rights are assaulted, and that's exactly, of course, what puts the state in a position to do that. I mean, it's very much merit for men is very much tied up in the individual, isn't it? And so there's something in the hard wiring that rebels for many men at the idea of recognizing themselves as part of, a disadvantaged class. Right. They look at, most FTSE 100 directors are men, most people in Parliament are men, blah blah blah, right. and it blinds them to the, and you can trot out statistics about homelessness and
right, workplace deaths and
domestic violence. I mean, we have 28 in our manifesto, and you can give them a shed load of statistics, and at this stage, a lot of men still don't get it. They I mean, I sometimes have. It may have something to do with my powers of persuasion, but I have sometimes half-hour-long conversations, at the end of which the guy is no, or woman is no more sort of clued up. But then again, I met a security guard the other day, who has a close friend who's in his 40s, and he says the guy's aged 10 years in 12, in the last year because he's denied access to his children.
Right.
And within 1 minute, he kind of got right. You have my vote. He said, he said, you must be a busy man, he said, but you have my vote. I totally get where you're going with this.
That's an interesting question. What do you think, and this is something that you could ask any MRA or MGTOW, whoever is involved in this movement, in the men's movement. What do you think is that, quote, red pill moment? Is it usually somebody going through a divorce? Because for me, it was other things. It was like kind of a period of about 10 years when, working in higher education and seeing what was going on there and seeing my friends get divorced. Do you think it's typically someone who's going through a divorce or has a friend who's going through a divorce and they see what's going on and they see this happening over and over and over again with so many of their friends?
Or it may even be a single life event. I mean, I guess I was 52 before I started to get really interested in this stuff. So that was 5 years ago.
Right.
So I recently had the pleasure of meeting Josh O'Brien, the 18-year-old guy who.
Oh, wonderful! I wanted to interview him. Yeah. What's he
in
like?
fact, he was with us. Oh, he's just a star. He was with us campaigning outside Nottingham University, and so I was with Ray Barry, our other candidate, who's 67, and of course, we're just written off as old angry old men, by a lot of people. But here you have this feisty 18-year-old.
Yeah, he's a kid.
It's a kid, bless him, but he's an amazing kid.
Yeah, sure.
And people didn't know what to do. It's kind of like when you have someone like Karen Strawn or Janet Bloomfield. They don't have no answer.
They don't know how to digest that. There's no way.
No defenses. So he was on fire. And in fact, Ray and I at one point looked at each other as if to say, the kid speaks for us. If anybody asks, we'll point them to Josh.
Great. That's wonderful. He's a very articulate guy too. He really is.
Really extraordinary, and and sort of campaigning and arguing. He's I wish I had that fluency, to be quite honest with you.
Well, he's obviously a very talented young man.
He is, and he's going to study politics at university in the autumn.
Good.
So but to go back to your point about what switches people on, for most people, not all people, but I would think 90% or more of MRAs. It's been a major life event, and the one that did it for me in about 2009 or 10 was going for a management consultant or business consultancy assignment, and basically being just kicked out the building by a huge radical feminist. I spoke to the interim agency who had put me forward, and it was just such a bizarre experience. And he admitted to me in a private phone call later that the woman had never been known to take on a man, and would. Yeah, I mean, it's a job I could have done, Robert. On the way to work every day. It was just so in my comfort zone. But he said she'd never been known to take on a man, and she had a long track record of taking on incompetent women in preference to competent men. And it was a point in time that I badly needed the work, 2009, after the Lehman Brothers and all the banking crisis and so on. So I said to this guy at the agency, well, why did you send me forward? And he said, well, they're a big customer, big clients, and they have to report the number of men and women that, and then sort of racial breakdowns and all this kind of stuff. So basically, she was, it was a complete waste of my time. There's nothing I could have done or say to land the assignment. And that was that. So, I mean, that's what kind of woke me up. And it was about the same time that David Cameron, leader of the Conservative Party, then in opposition, announced his intention to have all women shortlists. Now, I'd worked for the Conservatives from 2006 to 8, and I was a member. But I found that so offensive, so anti-meritocratic, that I resigned my membership that day. And a good many other Conservatives Conservative members did that day also. It was, but he's been very feminist friendly all the way through his administration. The number of appointment decisions he's made. He's thrown out very competent people like Michael Gove, the Education Secretary, and replaced him with Nicky Morgan, who's also the Minister for Women and Equalities. I mean, a dreadful woman. But he wanted to get his numbers up. Numbers of women. So a guy had to take the fall. Anyway,
I want to get back to the way British politics work, because there's a couple things I want to ask you about specifically, and a couple people I want to ask you about. But first of all, let's talk about your race for Parliament.
Okay.
I saw this marvelous video about your battle van.
Oh yes,
quite a marvelous spaceship you got there, man. I'm jealous.
It is.
That thing's awesome. But you're running. Obviously, it's got to be a real experience for you, and because you're championing a really unpopular cause in a very very serious way. You're running for Parliament. You're a men's rights activist who is running for Parliament, and as you just said, you've had people come up to you and say, "I'm with you. You've got my vote," and all that. But to be realistic, and I know you're a realistic guy, you're probably not going to win the election. But by running, you're really ruffling a lot of feathers, and just by doing that, you're accomplishing something pretty big. Is there a sense? Do you get some feedback of that sense that you're doing something just by running that's changing the whole game?
Yeah, no, totally. It's also been I always say, in fact, I said in Detroit in my speech, we are still the only we're the only men's rights party in the English-speaking world, still, to my surprise and disappointment.
Yeah.
But that's going to change, because men lost a political war that they didn't know was declared.
Sure.
So we need a new war, and that has to be political. So that means you have to go the political route. But it's also, apart from being the key to unlocking donations, and we had, by the way, I put up a blog post the other day. We had a second £1,000 donation from Num Cruncher. Two £1,000 donations. I mean, it's just
wow. That's a lot. That's a lot of money to donate to somebody.
And this guy is not a rich guy. I mean, he's given me some insights into what he does, and he leads a pretty frugal life. So he said, for example, he has a mobile phone that's 5 years old and all this kind of stuff. He just doesn't waste his money. But incredibly generous, and I'm seeing him later this week, hopefully. Yes. So it's the key to donations. I mean, right from day one, Robert, the party has been self-funding, or through donations. I'm kind of like, I guess, Paul Elam. I have no disposable income. I sort of live on my corporate pensions. So right from day one, we had donations, and and the party's been in the black ever since.
That's good news.
So, yes, it's fantastic. Without the donors, we simply wouldn't exist. It really is as simple as that. Sorry, I think I seem to have gone off a tangent here, Robert. What was the question?
Well, actually, I was saying, if you were getting some feedback as to whether you're getting some feedback as to the sense that you're doing something different and that you're changing the game. And you were talking about your supporters. Let's talk about feminists or your opposition.
Can we just before we do that, Robert? Sorry, just very, very quickly talk about the other thing that happens when you form a party. And it happened only recently, probably 2 months ago. An online news service, which I won't identify because of their horrendous attack on Paul.
I know who you're talking about.
Did a piece. I mean, in fact, mainly about our anti-feminism. But it got 160,000 hits in the first day. I was on a major TV program the next morning, and then the mainstream media just opened up like a can. I was, it's mainly attacks,
Yes.
of course, and some really silly stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, the Daily Telegraph, which was historically a socially conservative paper, had 4 articles attacking me in the space of 2 weeks. But if you look at the comments, something that's really changed, Rob. I don't know if you've seen this, but in the last couple of years, if you look at comment streams on anti men's rights, they are sort of. I mean, at one time they might have 10% of the comments were sort of pro MRAs. These days they're 90%, 95%. Even in the Guardian article which attacked me, and its Sunday sister paper, The Observer, the vast majority of the comments were supportive of us. It's really quite extraordinary, and that the mainstream thing has continued.
So I guess like any press is good press at this point for you.
Oh, exactly. Yes. I mean, I'd rather be attacked than ignored. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line for us. I mean, it's where we are, and it doesn't trouble me. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, some people say, how do you sort of stand that sort of personal attack? And it's just where we are in the war. We always knew that it would happen, and the attack on Paul was particularly savage, I think.
Yes, it was.
But he knows it. He knows as well as I do that we have to go through this, and it doesn't bother me. I'd rather be attacked than ignored.
Well, I mean, could you say that these attacks are validation of the fact that we're being taken seriously? Whether or not they want to admit it or not, that actually people are saying, oh my gosh, that there are people, feminists, who are scared to death of the things we're saying and the things that we're doing. And
that's totally true. And it's true of the media right across the political spectrum, left and right.
Left and right.
And I recently had an interesting example of that, where I was taken on. I mean, I was absolutely delighted to be taken on as a fortnightly columnist in the International Business Times, which has stratospheric number of hits. I mean, I can't remember the number offhand, but they talk about having 50 million hits a month, I think, or a year. I'm not sure, but it is just a hugely successful platform. And they have 2 feminist commentators already, two young feminist commentators. One of whom is our favourite of her type, Laura Bates, who runs the Everyday Sexism Project, or as we refer to it, the Everyday Whining Project. We always refer to her these days as Special Snowflake, and everyone knows, because she is that kind of entitlement princess type. So they had those 2, and a commissioning editor contacted me because he kind of said that they want some balance. So they commissioned me to do a fortnightly column on anything I wanted, and we're also paying me, which is, my goodness, that was
nice. You're getting paid right. That's great.
So, I don't know otherwise, Robert, but as far as I know, it was the only platform for an MRA in the mainstream media in the world. I'm just not aware of another one. So I thought, well, I'll start off with uncontroversial stuff. And given the title, International Business Times, I thought I'd do something business related. So I did one of my favourite subjects, gender balance in the boardroom, and explained about Campaign for Merit in business. And the bottom line is that longitudinal studies show that when you appoint more women to corporate boards, artificially increase the number of women on corporate boards, corporate performance declines. And of course it would. I mean, how could anything else happen? When you artificially take one group and push them forward. Right. So I did that. And for the second one, I thought also uncontroversial was male suicide. I had good feedback on both of them. And then out of the blue, the commissioning editor sent me an email saying he was cancelling the agreement. And in fact, I'll probably do a blog post. They've okayed me to do a blog post with the contents of that email. And basically they said that they'd had a meeting of these senior commissioning people, and they felt that while they were happy with those 2 articles, they were concerned about some pieces I'd done which courted controversy. I thought, my God, if you don't court controversy as an MRA, you should be fired, shouldn't you? So that was quite extraordinary. And I pointed out to them, I said, well, of course, controversy, because you know, there is no voice for men in the mainstream media. So of course you have to be controversial to get heard sometimes. Which again, I think is a refrain from Paul Elam, isn't it? And so I said, well, okay, but you brought me on for balance, and you're keeping on Laura Bates, who has won 2 Lying Feminist of the Month awards, and I'm sure she'll win another one before too much longer. Yeah. So I mean, but basically, I think the feminists saw that I would use that platform in time to attack them, and so they sort of they goodness knows what they said or wrote to International Business Times. I mean, perhaps they may have done a petition, God knows, because I mean that's one of their favourite tactics, isn't it?
Right.
So it was suspended. But I have a good relationship with them. I'm hoping that they change their mind at some point. And if it's not them, Robert, it'll be somebody else, because you can't keep this stuff. The dam will not hold forever.
No. So let's talk about the political and social climate in the UK.
Okay.
And I know that people around the world are going to be listening to this, but just as a counterpoint, as compared to the U.S., so we can learn more.
Okay.
And there's one person I wanted to ask about. One person I've been watching over the years, and her name is Alison Sanders. And the reason I bring her up is because in her career, there's just some crazy stuff that she has done that doesn't seem to be, to me at least, to have been possible if it were here in the U.S. or maybe somewhere else. And Alison Sanders, for those who are listening that do not know, she is the Director of Public Prosecutions in the UK, which really, and it's not like being the Attorney General here in the U.S., although there is a comparable position in the UK for Attorney General, which is, I can't remember the title, but she is the Director of Public Prosecutions. And 5 years ago, in 2010, she was actually successful in convicting 2 boys. They were aged 9 and 10, I think, for attempted rape. She convicted them, even though the alleged victim admitted that she lied, admitted that this was basically a bunch of kids playing doctors and nurses. I'll show you yours if you show me mine. I'll show you mine if you show me yours, which is a game that children have played since the beginning of time. Since we started wearing clothes, really, children have been playing this game.
Yeah.
So this, and I remember reading this story, and I was shocked, like so many people were.
Yes.
I was thinking to myself, okay, as soon as the girl said that she lied, the judge should have put the gavel down and said, everybody just go home now. This case is closed. Yeah. But that didn't happen. And so eventually these boys were convicted. And during the press conference after the trial, this woman, Alison Sanders, who was the prosecutor, she actually said this. She said, because the accusations were so serious, we had to go forward. Simply because the accusations were serious. This really turns the entire justice system on its head. It used to be that if an accusation was serious, that meant that the burden of proof was higher. That meant that the threshold at which the government would actually prosecute, that the threshold at which that would happen, that would be higher. But she said that no, because the accusations were so serious, we have to go ahead and go for a conviction. Yeah. And this is completely backwards. So she won this case. And back then she was just a prosecutor. Yeah. Now when was she promoted to Director of Public Prosecutions?
Sorry, Rob. I think it's about 2 years ago. But she is really unapologetically anti-male. If you see her interviews, she makes Harriet Harman look like a pleasant, balanced human being.
Absolutely, yeah.
And she has this very curious male hairstyle. I mean, she's just vile. But if you take, in our manifesto we talk about, they are basically the organisation she runs is the organisation which decides to prosecute or not to prosecute when the police, bring possible thing.
She's the
And
DA basically of.
yeah, and we have, yeah, and we had in the manifesto some analysis which showed that prosecution that about 1 in 4 prosecutions for sexual offences against the opposite sex should be of women, and that's sort of underpinned by. I can't remember the survey. There's a huge American survey which showed an extraordinary level of sexual offending against men by women, being made to penetrate, that kind of thing. Now, in the UK, I don't know about the States, but in the UK, feminists ensured that the Sexual Offences Act 2003 specified that rape could only be carried out by a man, and there's an equivalent. Or supposedly an equivalent. The maximum life sentence for that. Sorry, the maximum sentence for that is life. The female equivalent in the CPS guide, the Crown Prosecution Service guidelines, says that being made to penetrate, forcing a man to penetrate them is an equivalent offence. With an equivalent sentence, but it's not. I mean, the maximum is 10 years. But I go back to the point that 1 in 4 people charged with sexual offences against the opposite sex should be women. The actual figure in the UK is one in 152. But it doesn't just stop there. We recently had an example. They've been aching to bring a prosecution against a man for female genital mutilation, and recently they prosecuted a surgeon who'd delivered a baby from a woman who'd had FGM. I don't know where she'd had FGM, and as part of the operation afterwards, he put, I think, 1 stitch somewhere, and that was taken to be a restoration of FGM. Bizarrely enough, he actually did it probably to save her life, but that was a minor detail. Yeah. So he was all through the courts. And the other day somebody explained to me something that, where I hadn't joined the dots before, and which is why about feminists are always talking about the UK, and I wouldn't be surprised if the States was the same, but about how there are no prosecutions of people for FGM in the UK. And the reason is basically that FGM, in sort of parts of Africa where it happens and in communities from that background in the UK, it is carried out by women at the behest of women. And if the state were to prosecute the people who are inflicting FGM on female babies and girls, they would have to prosecute thousands of middle-aged and elderly black women. And the idea of doing that is so offensive to the establishment. It'll never happen. So this search for guilty men is up there with the search for the Loch Ness Monster.
I want to get back to that, but first I want to talk more about Alison Sanders.
Yes.
She recently, just a couple of months ago, and somebody emailed me something about this. There was a woman who was going to be prosecuted for facing the possibility of being prosecuted for filing a false rape claim. And she ended up killing herself. So Alison Sanders says, now we will not prosecute women who falsely accuse men of raping them because they might kill themselves, which is, again, another completely backwards concept where let's say if you were a man and you raped somebody, and you were facing prosecution and you killed yourself, would that mean that every man who has raped someone, they can't prosecute them anymore? It doesn't make any sense.
It's a double standard that just takes your breath away, isn't it?
Sure, absolutely. But it's one that it's so bold-faced, and you wonder how this woman has ascended to this director of public prosecutions. It's crazy.
She is of that type. I'm reminded of someone like Andrea Dworkin, that all sexual intercourse is rape. And I honestly believe that women like Alison Saunders, despite believes that I think she does see that. She's worse than Harriet Harman, and so the law on the bar on gaining consent is just so high, I suppose, I mean, I guess by her standards, 90% of the sex that goes on in the UK and probably globally is rape. So for example, the issue of, how the police are now required to really grill to really grill, accused men who are accused of rape to establish consent. And how do you do that?
You can't.
But there's not, so she'll be asked, or feminists are asked, well, what are the sentences that I have to utter or write? And God help, if a woman's had a glass of wine, then she's not capable of giving consent, which makes most sex in Britain, I guess, like a lot of other places, rape.
Rape.
It is just incredible.
Let's get back to the idea of prosecuting women in the UK. The UK seems to be, when it comes to the criminal justice system, seems to be probably, and this is saying a lot, it seems to be the most gynocentric criminal justice system on the face of the planet. They're actually thinking about doing away with women's prisons. They're thinking about doing away with
They are. Well, there are over 80,000 men in British prisons and under 4,000 women. Yes, I mean, the Causton report, by Baroness Causton, a Liberal Democrat peer, some years ago, basically was calling for virtually an end to women going to prison. And we had a story today in the paper about a married woman. I can't remember her age, but she basically had sex on quite a number of occasions with a 14-year-old boy. And the judge said something which, it always happens in these cases. Well, first of all, she was sort of virtually absolved because she didn't feel her husband was affectionate enough. I mean, that would really work with a husband who felt a wife.
My wife didn't give me enough sex, so I had sex with some underage girl. Right?
Yeah, so I had sex with a 14-year-old girl. So, that's okay. And the judge, it is always the same damn narrative. The judge, I don't know if it was a man or a woman, said to the woman, "You've come very close to a prison sentence, but it's a suspended sentence, i.e. no punishment at all." So this was a 14-year-old boy, and there was no sympathy shown towards the boy. But in the same paper, there was a story of a man who had sex with a 15-year-old girl, 3-year sentence. William Collins, a very important British blogger, has collated that if men were sentenced, were sentenced as leniently as women, 5 out of 6 men in British prisons today wouldn't be there. So the prison overcrowding problem would disappear at a stroke, because that would mean 68,000 out of the 81,000 wouldn't be there. But of course, politicians talk about reducing the number of women in, and of course the extra
this is some lauded social goal only to keep women out of prison, but not men out of prison.
Yeah. You never hear a politician saying that they want to reduce the male prison population. And the conditions, it hardly needs to be said that the conditions in men's prisons, a lot of them are Victorian and just in a dreadful state. And in the summer last year, a man, by way of protest at the temperature in his cell in one of these London prisons, I think it was, gouged out both eyes. Just on the edge, and it is, I mean, prison for most men in prison, and maybe even most women, have a number of mental personality disorders, very low literacy rates, numeracy rates, and it is basically long-term warehousing of the mentally ill. That's what it is.
Sure, you have maybe a higher proportion of people who, let's say, maybe are of a lower IQ or, as you said, are mentally ill. And here in the U.S., it's worse in that regard.
I've actually had an exchange of letters with a guy who's in a British prison, and he was between the ages of 7 and 14, he was repeatedly in sex sessions with his stepmother and stepfather. He went to the police. Both the stepfather and the stepmother admitted the offences. The man ended up in prison, and the woman wasn't even charged. I mean, that's the extent of. I mean, it's sort of beyond gynocentrism. It's almost like we need a new damn word,
It's
isn't it?
yeah, and this is what I kind of want to maybe you can't explain it, but this is something, and
No.
again, as gynocentric as things are here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
it's still very hard to understand for I think a lot of Americans how someone like Allison Sanders could rise to the
Yeah.
director of public prosecutions, and this idea that we are going to do away with throwing women in prison simply because they are women.
Yeah.
It's something that's how does that happen?
Well,
If you could
it'll
explain
be.
what's the mechanism by which that happens? Is it just I mean, because we have this over idealization of the female gender here in the U.S.
Yeah.
How does that work over there in the U.K. to where it gets to this extent, to where we have these things happening?
Well, I think it's. I mean, the Crown Prosecution Service has long been feminist dominated, even under male directors of public prosecutions. Um, but it's, they just have a different narrative, Robert. I mean, the narrative for men is that punishment will stop them offending, and the narrative for women is always compassion. You know, I mean, every time a woman does something wrong, it's down to being abused as a child. It's down to X, Y, Z, and those excuses are never used for men. It's down to that moral agency. And I point Alison, is it Timon or Tiemann? I'm never sure.
Timon,
Anyway,
Timon. I'm sorry, it's time. It is Timon. Yeah, Timon. Yeah.
I'm just a huge fan. Well, I'm a huge fan of all the honey badgers, to be quite honest. But she wrote or produced a wonderful film about something like men's rights explained using magnets or something.
Yes, that was one of her best.
It was breathtakingly good, even by her standards. And yeah, it's just it's two worlds, isn't it? Two worlds. I mean, gender should be blind, but it's certainly not gender blind. It's not race blind either. We think of the FGM as an example.
You mentioned David Cameron.
Yes.
He is a Conservative Party guy.
He is, but I mean, compared to, let's say, someone like Margaret Thatcher, he's very much left. I mean, there is no real serious right of centre party in Britain today. We have the UKIP, the United Kingdom Independence Party, who are the only party of any size who believe in meritocracy. So would abhor things like more women on corporate boards. But I think I mentioned it. I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, but sorry, I did. Yes, I mean, so Cameron wanted to introduce all women shortlists. He's been very feminist friendly from the outset of his leadership in 2005. I mean, just very, very, he is loathed by traditional conservatives, and he loathes them.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Obviously. Well, the whole like anti-pornography thing with him was the thing that something that came up on the radar a couple of years ago, about a year ago. Yeah, and I remember he joined hands with feminists and said we're going to censor the internet. And basically, whenever I hear nowadays, I've come to the point where whenever I hear someone saying we need to clean up the internet and make it anti-pornography. It's censorship is what it is. I don't care what however you want to paint it, it's censorship. Once you go down that road, all of a sudden you start censoring sites like A Voice for Men, which is basically what he did. I'm thinking the IPS providers in the UK, they developed a list of websites that were where you basically had to choose to have access on your browser, which is what they did there.
And particularly on mobile.
The first thing they did was A Voice for Men. We're not a pornography site. We don't publish pornography. We're a men's rights website.
No, but it seems to be true principally of mobile devices. It's not something I look at much, but certainly A Voice for Men, J4MB, and plenty of other sites are not accessible on mobile devices. You have to, as you say, you have to enable it, and a lot of people aren't very tech savvy. So
sure, well, they're counting on that. It appears. It seems to me that they're counting on the fact that people if they Google something like fathers' rights or something like that, and the Fathers for Justice comes up on their mobile phone, and they click it, and the website's unavailable, they're probably not going. Most people are probably not going to think even give it a second of thought. They're just going to go, oh well,
No.
they're going to go on with their day, and they're counting on that, and that to me is a real pernicious form of censorship by not even allowing people to see something that's there even on a casual glance.
Yes.
Which is what we're talking about here. But and again, I kind of it's just amazing that, and I know that you all have a parliamentary system there in the UK, which is different here in the US.
Which is but it's first past the post, which is pretty cruel towards small parties, of course.
Well, here in the U.S., we're cruel to small parties as well. Not so much on a local level, but definitely on a national level.
Yes.
But these kinds of things happen, and people talk about these things. Hey, this seems like censorship, or this Alison Sanders woman is a lunatic. Why is she in this position of power? And it just kind of makes me wonder. But I'm sure that you can say a lot of things about American politics that are strange. We elected George Bush twice to office. I mean, and I myself in the past was a pretty loyal Republican voter until that whole fiasco. But it just kind of it's one of those things that's like how do these people get in power? And then when you look at it, you see this in the case of this David Cameron and this Alison Sanders woman. You see, and maybe you can add on to this, but what I see is an establishment, a feminist establishment that for the past 40 years has been entrenching itself, both covertly and overtly, in the political system, in the media, and they have figured it out. They have figured it out who to choose to support for office and how to make them win an election, and they figured it out.
They totally nailed it. I mean, certainly, I agree with someone in the UK at least between 30 and 40 years ago, and it's almost like we talk about Harriet Harman, people, Harriet and Harman and Hattie Harperson and all this, and while people are making these jokes that evil woman is doing terrible things, I mean, she must be laughing at her enemies, because she's her impact on, let's say, on family law, the destruction of the nuclear family has been just immense.
She actually said publicly that the future of the family is just women and children and no fathers. She said this publicly. Harriet Harman said this publicly.
But she also said she came up with a rather convoluted thing in a report where she said it cannot be assumed that the presence of a father is an asset in a family. And you can think, well, on one level, yes, you can't assume that, but it's a damn good starting place, isn't it?
Sure. Well, you can't assume that any more than you can assume that the presence of a mother is an asset to the family.
Exactly. That's a very good analogy.
Same thing about mom.
Yeah. So, but with people laughing at the Harriet Harmans of this world, they don't get that radical feminism, or gender feminism, I think you might more commonly call it in the States. I think of Christina Hoff Sommers here. They don't get that radical feminism has been the gender ideology of the establishment for 30 to 40 years.
The lunatics are truly in charge of the asylum. That's
what
I like to tell. Because I have arguments with people all the time. Oh, I'm not one of those radical feminists. I'm like, okay, I know you're not one of those people, but those people are in charge. They've taken over our education system. They've taken over our media. They've taken over politics. Everything.
I mean, it's 21 years now since Christina Hoff Sommers wrote "Who Stole Feminism," and her distinction between gender feminists and equity feminists, I think, was just incredibly impressive. And I've yet to meet a feminist who doesn't very cleanly fall in one camp or the other. And I say to equity feminists, your brand of feminism means nothing. It has been totally uninfluential for 30 years. And they sometimes struggle, but I look on equity feminists as the people who the radical feminists hide behind, and I think feminists hide behind women of class. In the UK, I mean, apart from Erin Pitts, I would struggle to think of one other person of any stature sorry, any other woman of any stature in the UK who would be prepared to say I'm an anti-feminist. They'll happily say non-feminist at a push, but it's a sign of, I think it's a sign of the incredible herd instinct among women that it's something that feminists trigger, isn't it? This fear.
There's a lot of there's a lot of things that I think in a very cynical way, feminists take advantage of the differences between men and women and just basic human nature in a cynical way to get their means.
No,
I mean, we all know there are differences between men and women. Tend to be more group thinkers. They tend to look more towards approval. It doesn't mean that they're bad or evil. It's just a trait they have. And men tend to want to protect women. It's this white knighting instinct is something that's inborn into us. It's something we're bred, and that's something that's used in a very cynical way to exploit people, both men and women, and people.
But the sheer nastiness of the idea of keeping women, exaggerating rape and everything else, to keep women as a class in a state of fear, it is just vile.
It is vile. You on the 24th of February, and I want to bring this up, on the 24th of February, you were interviewed by a student at Nottingham University.
Oh, yes.
And I remember, and I just listened to it today, this morning when I was trying to figure out things to ask you. She brought up some questions from listeners or people from the student body, which were clearly cherry picked. I'm sure that there were a lot of people who wanted to ask a lot better questions than were asked, and the questions were thrown in the bin or whatever. But one question was asked that said, that was clearly directed at you as I guess maybe as an attack question, and the question was basically, why do you think a movement that is based on hatred of one gender or based on disadvantaging one gender will succeed? And they were clearly talking about the men's rights movement and your party and whatnot. And the first thing that popped in my mind when I heard that question was, well, feminism has been wildly successful in doing just that. They've been wildly successful in targeting one gender, half the human race, and gaining tremendous political power and influence.
I know, but I go back to the point that I was 52 before I started to really understand some of this stuff, Robert. And so I can't be surprised that someone at the age of 20 doesn't. I mean, Josh O'Brien is just such an extraordinary. But no, most of them won't get that. A couple of people outside Nottingham University when we were campaigning there said to me something along the lines of, "You must have mental health issues, mate."
Sure.
Because what we're saying,
there's something wrong with you. It's the pathology. They like to treat.
Misogyny, blah blah blah. Given that these people, I mean, bright as they are, have never been exposed to the arguments that you see on A Voice for Men and J4MB and so on, it's not surprising that they think feminism is about equality. And the woman asked something like, what would you say to male feminists? And I'd say I gave what was in hindsight a very poor response, which was that I'd say that they were traitors to
their own class.
Yeah, and I thought, well, hang on. Later I thought, well, they wouldn't understand that feminism relies on men not recognizing themselves as part of a class. So that's a bit of a nuanced point. So I should have said something like, feminism is not what these guys think it is. It is a gender supremacy ideology fueled by misandry. And if you ask 10 students, Robert, what misandry is, I'd be impressed if you found one that knew. It is just, in the general public, it is not a known word, at least in the UK. I don't know about the US. I mean, someone told me that it was only recently that the Microsoft Word spelling checker recognized the word misandry.
Right,
and
yeah.
I quite believe it.
Let's get back to your campaign.
Yeah.
I've seen that you've acquired several volunteers.
Yes.
Mr. Shadowfax is one of your volunteers. Big fan of his.
Yes, he's great. Yeah. And it's good to have supporters on a practical sense, because it is something that is very frustrating to get people to actually, let's say, spend a day door-to-door leafleting and so on. So that is, but I think that's been true of the MRM forever, really, hasn't it? You know, actually getting people to help
actually do
practically.
something. And I just as a, this is not a very journalistic thing to do, but I wanted to say to anybody who's listening, and this is true, one of the most rewarding things you can do is engage in actual physical activism.
Absolutely,
the coolest thing.
Totally.
I used to do lobbying for SAVE, and there's just a tremendous amount of satisfaction when you walk into an office on Capitol Hill here in the U.S. or I'm sure in the U.K. I don't know what their lobbying efforts are like there, but there's just a tremendous amount of satisfaction when you talk to a public official or a staffer and say, look, here's some issues that you should pay attention to, and knowing that you just did it, and knowing that you planted a seed of thought in their mind is something that, first of all, is crucial. We're not getting anywhere without doing that. Second of all, it gives you a sense of reward that nothing else does.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I'm very much of that belief. I mean, the reason I formed I started off with forming the Anti-Feminism League, but then I realised after a time, you know what, these guys at AVFM have just so nailed things. You know, well, what am I doing spending my time on that? You know, I'll direct people to AVFM. That'd be more useful. But then I decided to launch what was and still remains the only campaign in the world to persuade a government not to bully companies into appointing more women onto their boards. That was the Campaign for Merit in Business. I gave evidence to House of Commons, House of Lords inquiries. I presented the longitudinal studies which showed that their direction of travel was going to lead to corporate decline. And they listened. They didn't object. But the assaults have just got worse since. So it kind of made me realise that, you know what, as much as it pains me to say so, rational arguments are not winning here. So you take something like domestic violence, I guess is an obvious one with Erin, who's been saying the same things for over 40 years. Rational arguments are not going to win this war. You know, we sort of have to get more practical. You know, even things like, I've got a lot of good response to just our magnificent battle van. You know, it's making it tangible, Robert. I think that's the thing. People can see something. Whereas otherwise it's too easy to live in this bubble, the MRM bubble, and think you're changing the world, and you're not, because we are still a small percentage. I mean, growing fast, I got that, but we have to get more practical. It is wonderful just being out on the streets, campaign with these guys, and we have a very good pub lunch, and it's just great meeting up. But we have to get more practical, and we have to get more political.
So the election is in just under 6 weeks, 5.5 weeks. You said.
Yeah.
What if you get elected? Which is a big if, and I'm not saying that to
no.
Anything. It's a big if. Picture yourself in Parliament on your first day of work, I guess. You're
right.
You've got, I guess, I don't know how it works there here in the U.S. when someone gets elected to, let's say, the House of Representatives. You have a discretionary budget of $1 million. You can do whatever you want with it. You can hire whoever you want. You hire consultants to be your staffers, and basically the people that got you elected. You hire them, and you come up with an agenda. What in the UK? First of all, two things. What would you, if you were elected, what would you do? What would be your course of action on your first day? I mean, who would you hire for your staff? What kind of agenda would you lay out as a plan for that? And what's the length of the term of office for a member of parliament?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
Okay, so like what will be the trajectory you would place, that you would set for yourself?
I think it would be a magnificent platform for informing people about the assaults on human rights of men and boys. And we have 20 areas in our manifesto. It's a snappy 80 pages long. And I think even if we, had, if you like, legislation and guidelines that were based on evidence. So, for example, domestic violence is a very interesting one, where the Home Office, albeit with a Conservative Home Secretary, is basically using the Duluth model, on domestic violence, that that men use violence or the threat of it to keep women down as a class. That's been discredited so many times, it's unbelievable. But they recently had a consultation exercise, which was informed by Women's Aid, a radical feminist organisation, and they called for submissions from members of the public and from DV organisations. They didn't call for submissions from the people who know most about this, the researchers in the field. So it was beyond cynical. So I think it's important to start winning some battles, Robert. And I think DV to me is one where that is a winnable, an early winnable battle, I think.
Because why do you say that?
Because the evidence base is so overwhelming now.
Sure.
I mean, Professor Martin Fiebert has, what's his bibliography? 330 studies. The PASC survey, Fiebert said something along the lines of all the evidence shows that women are as physically aggressive towards opposite sex partners as men, or more aggressive. And there's just a mountain of evidence, and the state operates in complete denial of that. And I think all states do, from what I've not heard of any that don't operate along those lines. But I guess a related question is what would success for J4MB look like in the election? And that's something that we've long given a lot of thought to. Now, I'm standing in the Ashfield constituency, which historically has been a cast iron safe Labour seat. In 2005, the Labour MP got, I think, a majority of 10,000. And then for 2010, they parachuted in, the Labour Party parachuted in an ex-Sky presenter called Gloria De Piero, and she won the seat with a majority of 192. So came within, almost lost a seat for Labour, and I say it was a very safe Labour seat. So I think there was hostility to the fact that she'd been parachuted in. There was hostility also to the fact that she was appointed from an all-women shortlist, and the Labour Party is currently the only party that has those. The Labour Party is, to all intents and purposes, it's now the feminist party. It is no longer the party of the working man.
As
so,
very much the same with the Democratic Party here in the U.S.
Yeah. So it was one of the reasons for picking that seat that pollsters will tell you that it's very difficult to predict future marginal seats. There's quite a big error, against forecasts. But the thing you do know, of course, is in a marginal seat, what did the MP win? But how many votes did the MP win by last time? So we know she won by 192. So we can say as a statement of fact that had J4MB stood in Ashfield in 2010, and had we attracted just 97 votes from Gloria De Piero, she would not have been elected. And she's the Minister for Women and Equalities, the shadow Minister for Women and Equalities. So anything more than 97 votes on May the 7th will be cast iron proof of our strategy of standing against MPs, and we're hoping in 2020 to be fielding 50, maybe even 100 candidates. And at that point, so this is a thing about proving the strategy, works at the coalface, so to speak. And if we field 50 to 100, we'll be able to say to the most anti-male party, which will almost certainly be Labour at that time. I mean, the Conservatives are anti-male, but not quite so vicious. And if it's a Labour government, regardless of who wins this election, we expect to field 50 to 100 maybe candidates in 2020, probably against Labour, and that could radically alter the chances of them being elected or re-elected. And the media will find that interesting. I have no doubt.
Before I want to close on this, let's get to the media reaction, or just basically the public reaction.
Yes.
Of you having this party, Justice for Men and Boys,
Yeah.
and you're running for office, and you're being a public figure who is an unabashed men's rights advocate,
Yeah.
activist. Now you said that you've told me that people in private or on an aside that you've met have been supportive, saying I support you. I see my friend going through this divorce. I see. My friends, all these terrible things happen to fathers and to young boys, and this whole thing with our justice system and whatnot. But if you could just give me, if you could name maybe the top 3 most ridiculous things that have happened in an attempt to smear you since you started running.
Oh, okay.
And not only that, but like also, and I don't want to dig up any bad memories or anything, but I'm sure that you've been attacked in a very personal way, because our opponents, and we know this, feminists are their weapon is personal destruction.
Yes.
If you could tell me what attacks have been leveled against you that have been personal.
Yeah. I mean, one that comes immediately to mind is the guy called Michael Deacon, who's the parliamentary sketch writer for the Daily Telegraph. He's a young man, but then everyone, I mean, journalists these days are so young, aren't they? It's incredible.
Yes, they are incredibly. It's here in the U.S., it's like you'd be hard pressed to find a newsroom that has a single person over the age of 30 in it.
Yes, extraordinary. So he wrote in a piece in his column. It's just extraordinary. He clearly, I didn't get any sense that he'd read the manifesto or even the executive summary or anything like that. And it was just bizarre. So he'd say, he was inferring that I must be a bit of a tinfoil hat guy. So he was saying, yes, I mean, the oppression of men is terrible in the UK. What with the monarch for the last 55 or 60 years being a woman. And it's kind of like, what? And he ended with mentioning my 2 divorces and saying, well, since Mike is so keen on men, maybe the 3rd time round he should marry a man. And it's kind of like, what?
Yeah.
And 95% there were a lot of comments on there, and 95% of them were criticizing the article or supporting me and our party's position. So you got to think, Robert. The proprietors must be seeing that there's something happening, and how do they monetize it? Which is why I was so pleased at the International Business Times, because I thought, right, these guys, they'll have looked at what we do. They'll have looked at their support for AVFM and so on. And you know what? There's a lot of people that are getting on this bandwagon. And how do we make money? And I've always said that the day that the dam will break is the day that the mainstream media works out how to make money from all this.
Yes.
And so the International Business Time, that was a flavour, I think, of what is to come.
So you're optimistic.
When you have people, incredibly optimistic. I mean, I've only been in this interested in this stuff, at a high level for 5 years, but I'm just incredibly optimistic. Now, if you look how far we've come, with each year that passes, well, I struggle to find the words. It's the people are getting it. I recently put up a video of 2. In fact, you guys also posted it, which was good, of 2 female supporters, one in her 40s, I think, or possibly 30s, and one in her 60s. And, if we go back to the herd instinct among women, I think there's an alternative herd forming. So with people like Karen Strawn, Janet Allison, and the others, and these are really smart, sassy women, and I think it's one of the reasons we do things like the Lying Feminist of the Month or the Gormless Feminist of the Month. Now, I don't think gormless is a term that you use in the States, but it basically means someone who's pretty stupid. And so we have an image on our Gormless Feminist of the Month awards of this cross-eyed woman. So we ridicule feminists because they're ridiculous. It's our duty, I think. And more and more. I mean, the more and more, I think women, sorry, are going to say, you know what? Which of these two herds do I want to stay with? These vile women who, despite what they say, we know hate men with a passion, or the smart ones who want to cooperate and live with men, and return to I guess what is a historical normality of cooperation between men and women. And so I was pleased to hear, the AVFM, the forthcoming conference is something. I think the title is something about building bridges with women, and I think that's just terrific. I really do. I mean, I know there are MGTOWs who don't agree with this, but I think it's just so important that we reach out to women, and otherwise it's too easy to just write us off as women haters, and we aren't women haters. We all know that.
It's interesting. Maybe we should expand on this a little bit. Even just women who believe in a sense of fairness.
Yes.
It's not so much about like I want to go back to the kitchen. I want a man to take care of me and all this stuff. And I, as a MGTOW, I have no intention of getting married or taking on the role of a provider for a woman. That does not appeal to me. But there are many women out there who just, out of a sense of fairness, like, listen, men are human beings and they're not being treated like human beings, and this is a basic problem. And I am a big fan of the idea that we should, anyone who has that mindset, who believes in basic fairness, whether you be man or woman or black or white or Asian or Latino or whatever, should feel comfortable in our movement, and this idea that that we're going to exclude women because they are by their nature exploitative or whatever. That kind of talk doesn't appeal to me. I think that it's just
But it's another reason. I think it is difficult for women to stand up for men.
Sure.
Which is, to my mind, another reason for going political, because at the end of there's the secrecy of the voting booth, and a woman doesn't need to say anything pro men in her life, but if she puts a cross against the candidate, the J4MB candidate or whatever, then that's it's not a difficult thing to do, but it's if enough women do it, then I think that'll change the world.
All right. Well, listen. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Again, it was great meeting you in Detroit last summer, and I so much look forward to seeing you again. I guess it's in October.
It's October, yeah. And now, last time, as you may remember, I brought along Johnny.
Yeah.
And who I think everyone enjoyed meeting Johnny. And,
Johnny Walker was a really nice guy. I really enjoyed talking with him.
And Jim, of course.
Yes, Jim Beam.
So got Jim along, and Glenn Finnick.
All right. I don't remember him, but maybe I've been talking with John for a bit too long at that point. Am I right in thinking that the US is going to allow Havana cigars to be imported? Yeah, sure. Yes, I think. Yeah, maybe we can get you some. Yeah.
Because I mean, if that's so, I'm going to bring along some Romeo y Julieta Patriarch cigars. Because I mean, Dan, I think it was Dan Perrins, gave me his last cigar, and we had on the morning after the conference, we before we went to the airport, we had some cigars, and I think if memory serves right, I'm sure it does. Jack Barnes and Attila joined us. And it was just such a memorable thing, just shooting the breeze, so I'll bring along a box of Patriarch cigars for you guys.
Wonderful. I'll be looking forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
It's been a huge pleasure, Robert. Thank you.